Welcome, everyone. I'm Katie Capuzzo, Director of Community at WISE, and together we're building a global community dedicated to empowering the next generation of women in sales. Excited to have you all joining us this morning. This is our last virtual event of the year, and it's a special one. So excited to kick this off with Udemy as our sponsor for today's event. Udemy was founded in 2010 with a mission to improve lives through learning by democratizing access to skills development. And today, they've grown into one of the world's largest AI powered skills acceleration platforms. So I'm excited to have two leaders from the Udemy team ready to share all their knowledge with us today. We're going to be getting into the topic leading through the middle, this idea of how do you lead through hard times? How do you be an individual contributor when and stay motivated when maybe you're not close to hitting quota or things are outside of your control? So we'll be talking motivation, ways to build on what you've already started for the year, and really strategies that help both leaders and ICs across the board. So joining me in that conversation today, we have Pam Marsh, Director of Strategic Sales at Udemy, and Jenny Payne, Sales Leader at Udemy. So Pam, let me hand it over to you first to tell us a bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Katie. As she mentioned, I am Director of Strategic Sales at Udemy, which means I get to partner with some of the world's largest brands globally. But I've also spent the last 20 years leading high growth sales organizations, both from the ground up as well as expanding, into, global organizations. And I'm just very passionate about leadership and sales and honored to be here today.
Great, excited to have you. Jenny?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jenny Payne. I've been at Udemy for a year, managing the strategic and large enterprise ADR teams. And I like to consider myself a failed collegiate athlete. My whole identity growing up was sports and soccer, and I had a career-ending injury in college. So it really forced me to figure out a new identity. And I landed in sales, and I'm so happy I did. I've been able to channel just my competitive nature with also just a need for a team dynamic, and kind of run the gamut in sales roles. So I've tried on every hat and I found leadership because it really energizes me to maximize potential.
Great. We'll dive in more to that here in a bit. And sales is a great place to land for many athletes. I'm sure there are many on the call right now. Throughout the conversation, y'all, please drop in where you're tuning in from. You can ask questions in the chat or use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those at the end of the conversation today. So let's go ahead and jump in. This question is for both of you, and we know this time of year brings with it both wins and obstacles as you're reflecting back on what's happened the last few quarters. So what were some defining moments from your org and specifically from your teams this year? We can start with you, Pam.
Sure. So I've been at Udemy just around 6 months now. And so part of joining the organization was building a new team, standing up a new team. So that has really been a defining moment for my, so far this year is starting to see this new team come together. My last new hire just finished onboarding this past month. And so we're starting to see how the teams are working together. My philosophy when it comes to whether you're hiring, just one or two team members or standing up a whole new team is thinking about it as puzzle pieces, right? And so you don't need, a lot of this exact same. You need to have some foundational, experience, but thinking about what are the different strengths and different attributes to create a high performing team where everyone is able to feed off of each other, and even your highest performer has an opportunity to learn something new from somebody different. So when you bring on new team members, that's an opportunity to continue to elevate the team in different creative ways. And so that's been a really proud moment for me, is finally seeing that come together with the entire team, starting to see them bounce strategies off of each other, collaborate, and seeing how they're helping elevate each other in ways they never even thought possible just by coming together with different backgrounds and ideas.
That's great. It's so nice when all of those things you can see the fruits of your labor and how it all is working together. And I'm glad to say that, or glad to hear that you really look for those different attributes to build your team up, because I think diversifying that experience, perspective, how you work can go a long way. So we'll dive into that a little bit more later, but I'm glad to hear that that's been a great reflection for you this year. What about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I think every year brings new challenges, whether those are setbacks or just opportunities of extreme growth. But what really stood out to me this past year in terms of my team is the energy that we cultivated. So I'm a firm believer that your team does not go to bed energized about your strategy. Maybe that's my roadmap as a leader. But what truly motivates them is the energy that you bring to every interaction. So I really believe the best part of this past year was in that mundane long stretches of the middle where we hyped each other up and we really focused on controlling what we can control, and even redefining what success looks like. So maybe it's not a target that's so black and white. Maybe it's, hey, we're going to lead a really successful discovery call and we're going to share it with our team and we're going to get feedback. So I think for me, the energy is something that really stands out that our team was able to cultivate this year.
Do you feel like you needed to bring a certain energy first in order for the rest of the team to kind of absorb that?
Yes, I think the leader is the energy calibrator. It's incredibly important to mirror that so people pick up on that and feed off that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. I think we're having some trouble with the chat. So if you are able to say anything in there, feel free. If not, if you have questions, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So just drop your question in there. We'll still see it. We'll get to it at the end. But it seems like there's a bit of a lag on our end with the chat. So hopefully it'll work itself out throughout. But we'll just continue on. Pam, you're known to create high performing cultures that blend both data driven strategies with creative go to market approaches. What does this actually look like in practice?
I think in practice, it's giving structure, but also the ability to have freedom and that creative space, and then also celebrating all of the steps that it takes, in the middle, right? Getting a big deal done doesn't happen overnight. There are so many little wins that happen, over months, days, years sometimes that we need to make sure we're tracking against. And so we have a structure. I try to implement a structure where you have an objective, which is your end goal. That's the big goal. You have strategies to get you there, and then you have tactics. And your objective typically doesn't change. That's the big milestone. That's either the deal that you want to get across the finish line. It could be a promotion that you want to earn. It also could be just any other, major milestone. You want to hit a metric, in a certain period of time, any goal that you have, and that's fixed. And we're gonna keep eyes on that prize, but how we get there, we may have to be creative and try different paths. And maybe you hit a roadblock here, but let's get creative and try something different today. And that helps continue to show momentum, and you can continue to celebrate, every tactic, every strategy against that, that's moving you into that direction. And so leveraging the data to continue to push, make sure that you're pulling the right levers, but then also allowing space for creativity to make those daily wins.
Do you find that creative thinking is something you look for when you're hiring for your team?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
how do you assess that in an interview process?
Typically, I like to ask more behavioral-based questions in
Okay.
interviews. So, providing an example of a time when, maybe you did have this objective, but you hit some roadblocks. What did you do? What was the most creative strategy that you took? How did you lean on others, right? We don't just naturally have to always be creative. A big part of how you're successful is leaning on others, asking for other people's input, having strategy sessions, and collaboration with other, great minds that you have access to, and leveraging those resources is also part of being creative.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. And the team piece to
Mhm.
be able to collaborate in that way. That's great to hear. Jenny, you've developed a framework for coaching reps. Tell us how you first assess where the seller is starting from and how you then introduce the framework.
Yeah, I think it's really important to offer reps clarity. So knowing that every rep is unique, and meeting them where they are, I break it down into three parts. So it's mindset, activity, skill set. So that allows me at every interaction, every point that I'm speaking with my rep to focus on one thing and one thing only, because reps are inundated with data, with activities, with so much to do that it's really important to simplify as a leader and offer them that clarity. So we might be working on a mindset challenge, and that could look like, I just stepped into this role and I don't believe that cold calls are an effective way to get in touch with someone. So that's something that we really need to switch from more of a pessimistic mindset to an optimistic mindset. We could have an activity challenge. So conversion is great, but it's purely just numbers at this point. Or maybe a skill set. Maybe someone jumped into this role and they can't lead an effective cold call. So we're always working on one thing. And it's really important to separate accountability from development because every rep needs development, no matter if they're an underperforming rep or a high performing rep. I think it's really important to combine the two, but also separate them in most interactions.
Mhm. I guess what does that look like, that separation, accountability versus development? If we're all needing development, when does the accountability piece come in for you?
Yeah, so the accountability piece is an accountability meeting that happens every week, and we are just talking KPIs. It's super short, it's 10 to 15 minutes. And reps understand that this is a very results driven role. They chose sales, so they know that we need to be accountable and we need to hold ourselves to high standards. Separating that, I believe that you can't have a tough conversation about metrics and then lead into an effective coaching call. There's just energy that I don't like to combine the two. So it's a separate interaction in the form of a one-on-one where we have, okay, here's what we're going to work on today, whether it's mindset, activity, skill set. And I make sure that they're two different interactions.
That's interesting. Do you do anything like that on your team, Pam, where you try to separate out conversations? Is that like a Udemy thing or is it specific to y'all's leadership style?
We have similar approaches. I love that framework that Jenny has. I think absolutely every good leader like should be thinking about those three elements when you're talking about coaching and development. Because sometimes you hear skill versus will, right? That it's a similar idea, but it's really important that when you are coaching and working with team members, that you're looking at all of those levers. I think it's easy, especially in sales, to think of, going back to what I just mentioned, that the objective, I've got this objective and we're just constantly powering through toward it. But taking a step back and say, hey, we're hitting a few roadblocks here. Is it because we're trying all the things and it's not working and we need to come back and take different creative approaches? Or are we just not, have we not tried enough, right? Or do you feel like you need to be enabled in a different way? Do you feel capable to do these things? How can I enable you in a different way? If we feel like the approach is right, but maybe we need to rethink our mindset, or I need to provide you more enablement in that area. So always like giving that space to take a step back and ask more questions and really evaluate what might be going on, especially if you're hitting roadblocks with progress.
Mhm. I love that across your teams, whether it's deal specific or employee specific, you're not just trying to fit into this certain mold or game plan, and that's what you're going with to see it through. You're willing to be creative, adjust, and try to get the best out of both scenarios. So it's great to hear that that's across both of your teams.
Yeah, and
This,
I would add also, sorry to interrupt, but just
please.
thinking about the individual strengths of that individual. I've had examples where I have a team member that's just really good in person with customers. They really shine, they win over, building relationships. And then I have other team members that they don't love the in-person stuff, but they're really good, in other forums. And so really leaning in on where their strengths and where they shine and where they have the most confidence. So always building up confidence in other areas, but also giving them space to like lean in where they are strong, I think is really important too. So coaching to the individual.
Mm-hmm. I think this ties into the larger conversation of leading through the middle in times when maybe quota feels unattainable in that moment or things are so far out of your control. What are those areas that you can uplift your team? And so you mentioned skill development and also just calling out the skills that they're good at and helping them lean into those areas. Do y'all find that you are recognizing those skills in your team and you are being the one saying you are great at this, what do you think? Or oftentimes is the team pretty aware of where their skills are and they're coming to you advocating to lean more into those areas? Maybe it's a mix.
I would say it's a mix. Yeah, I think it depends on the rep. But a lot of the times we can use data to understand, like we use a tool called Nooks. So that gives us a very clear scorecard with data and metrics where we can say, okay, you're actually really good in this aspect of a call. Let me pair you with someone that isn't so strong here, and vice versa. So I think it's a combination of the two, but we're very fortunate to have tools that help assess where a rep is at.
Yeah, I also like to, again, having space where you're asking these questions and encouraging the reflection. Sometimes it's, you know, us sharing with the team members observations. It's them coming to us where they're excited, but then also asking them what energizes you? What part of this job do you love the most, right? And making sure that you have time on the calendar for those things or you're leaning into those things, because what you find then is if you're giving them activities that are really motivating. So for example, in sales, an example might be, you know, the part that I love the most is actually talking to customers about their strategies. The administrative burden is something that drains me. So even using those words, what energizes you and what drains you about the role, that doesn't mean that we don't need to do both things,
Right.
but let's create more space and strategy and around the things that energize you, and maybe set some goals around that. So if getting in front of customers and talking strategy is something that energizes you the most in your day, let's increase our goals in having those types of conversations. And if the administrative stuff is really burdens, you know, feels like it reduces your energy, maybe we pocket that and create a strategy where you're going to save all that to end of day, or maybe you start your day with that and knock it out, so then you can focus on the other things that do, you know, bring you excitement. Or maybe we can figure out a way to automate some of those things. So that's just another example of like leaning into the individual and talking about their strengths and leveraging that to create high performance.
I went through a similar exercise recently where it was kind of, we didn't use the words energizes and drains, but I love that framework because to your point, it doesn't mean we can't do, we can just say, okay, we're not doing those things anymore, but it is a reframing of what can we then help with resources wise, or just reframe your day to better prioritize. So I love that you do that with reps as well. It was very helpful for me. And a
Yeah.
perfect time with end of year performance reviews and things like that for people to kind of start thinking of it in this way.
And blocking your calendar around those things, being really intentional. It also is good as a leader to make notes of these things, so that if you are, and I think part of the conversation is how do you keep team members motivated if they start to feel burnt out, if they start to, you can recall those things. Hey, I remember we talked about this thing really energizes you. Let's do some, are you feeling burnt out right now because you haven't been able to spend as much time on these things? Let's do some short goals to get you re-energized in those areas, or have things shifted, right? It's a good thing that you can continue to pull out. It's not a one-time conversation. It's how you continue to grow together.
Yeah, that's great advice. Jenny, we'll start with you for this question and then we'd love your take, Pam. It feels especially relevant as we enter into performance review season, like we just shared. How can managers keep top performers motivated and advancing in their careers when a promotion isn't currently an option?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And some of the times the title isn't available that reps want. So I find it's really important to stretch them horizontally when we can't stretch them vertically. So that might look like more visibility in the organization or more influence that we can have just while we allow them to grow in different ways that might not be as much in height, but more in depth. So some examples that we have done on our team is we give them an opportunity to teach back to the team on something that they're really efficient at or they're really passionate. Kind of boils back down to what Pam was saying. What energizes them and how can we protect that energy, but also find more meaningful ways for them to have a bigger impact while we wait for that title.
I agree with Jenny. I would encourage every leader to also get in the habit of reframing that growth doesn't have to mean a title change. Sometimes that's just the default. And talking to our team members, like sometimes that is a goal. It doesn't have to be though. And so anytime I'm talking to my teams about their goals and their growth goals, I try to be really intentional about what is it that you want in your career in the next 5 years, in the next 2 years, in the next year? What is it that you want? How do you want to be spending your day? How do you want to be contributing? What would you have liked to have learned or mastered? How do you want to be seen within the organization? Or are there personal goals that you want your career to have enabled for you? And so thinking about growth not as this one size of a title change can really help you show them growth and progress in their career, even if it isn't that title. And that's whether or not the title is available. I have an example of a team member, and I think this is often, especially when someone wants to go from an individual contributor to a leadership role, because that can be a big jump, and there isn't always opportunity. Like leadership roles are less available often in organizations than individual contributor roles. And this person also wasn't someone that I think would have been the best fit for what the organization needed as a leader, right? And so having conversations with him around why do you want to move into leadership? What is it about that role that excites you that you would want to get out of it, right? And so we started just documenting all of the things, removing the title, but what is it that you want? What are the things that you don't love? So the things he was saying he didn't love about the job are a lot of what you have to do as a leader, right? And so helping him see through that and talk through that. But even still, we said, okay, we're going to set some goals in the next 6 months. We are going to get you 80% of these things that you want, that you're excited about, whether or not we have the title. And we'll continue to evaluate if the title is right for you. So things like being able to have a seat at the table with executives within the organization to help create, company strategy. Great. There's some, right, and every organization is different if there's opportunities there. But again, you start to get creative. I'm going to have you lead a task force. You've got some great ideas in this area. Why don't you put together a team and come up with a proposal that I will get you an audience in front of our executive team to present, right? And so there were different ways that, and I think what's important here is we co-wrote that. So I also, as this leader, had ownership in how can I help you achieve these things that you're really excited about in the next 6 months. So once we went through that, I was able to get him, he became a mentor, was able to coach and develop, new team members in other areas. So we checked off all of these boxes. Finally, a first-time leader role did come up, approached him about it. He's not interested anymore. He said, I actually am so fulfilled and so energized by the things that I'm able to do now without having to have the burdens that sometimes come with leadership. I actually don't want that anymore. So I feel like, and that's not always the case either, but that was, we actually had essentially a project plan, right? That we went through together, his personal development and his career goals, and we just took the title off of it. And it was really successful.
That's a great anecdote. Jenny, I'm curious if you've experienced any similar conversations where you've had to almost show them by letting them also experience it themselves, whether it be for a promotion or title or just them wanting to maybe change something about their role.
Yeah, definitely. It comes up a lot in the ADR world. It is kind of your intro into sales. So it's the first step. And it's a really hard role. You face a lot of rejection. And a lot of the times on those days, maybe you talk to 20 people, everyone said no. You want an out and you just want to get to that next step really quickly. So I love what Pam mentioned. I think leadership isn't about control, it's really about energy calibration. So, how can we preserve their energy and find something that really excites them within the organization, but help build towards that instead of just have something that is, a quick reaction to a bad day?
Mhm. And it sounds like you've both created spaces on your team where they feel comfortable coming to you, expressing the excitement for something new, but also trusting you to help guide them there. So that's great to hear. Pam, let's get your perspective on this. Your team is responsible for new business and expansion, which can mean extended sales cycles. So, how do you detect early signs of burnout on your team, and what steps do you take to address it before it becomes a bigger issue?
I think early is the key. Just being aware of lower engagement, maybe on a team call, any slight changes in behavior, and just asking, right? Asking, hey, I noticed you weren't as vocal on our team call. just want to check in on you and come from a genuine care about you as a person, and hopefully as a leader that it is genuine, and not because, hey, I need you to pick up your energy, I need you to do these things for the business. It's I care about you as a person. And when team members know that you have their back, that you care about them, like you'll see them open up with you, and you can kind of build together on like, what do you need in order to get back on track, to get, clear some space for you. Maybe you need to take time off. It doesn't mean you have to go take a week-long vacation. Maybe you do, but you can also find those moments where, hey, looking at your calendar, I think you just need to like go for a walk. Let's clear your afternoon. We're not going to bother you. Go re-energize, go for a walk, go grab coffee, get out of the house. Let's come back. We'll regroup in the morning and like, let's see how we can do this together. And so also asking like, how can I remove barriers? Are there things that I can take on, in the short term, so that they feel supported? But just trying to get ahead of it early. And even if they're not showing up differently, just being aware of, hey, this has been a long sales cycle and their calendar is very full. Sometimes those moments of you leaning in and saying, hey, your calendar's been really full, you've been working really, really hard, go take the afternoon off, gives them that moment to just, thank you, I needed that. And maybe I didn't realize I needed it.
I can personally attest that goes such a long way. That acknowledgement, even, because everyone on your team is working hard. So I think sometimes reps may feel like this, everyone's working hard. I don't need to bring up that I'm doing all of this. So to have your leader recognize that you are doing those extra things, going the extra mile, and just saying, take an afternoon, it can go a long way. So I love to hear that.
I think a recognition, kind of to your point, is also really important, and recognizing, even though, maybe the deal isn't done yet, but hey, you had a really solid day. You made some really good progress here, or great job getting that meeting. I know how hard you've been working on that. That is those little moments that show like how hard I've been working, and that can like re-energize to keep going too.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Jenny, you're a co-lead for Close Hers, which is Udemy's employee resource group for women in revenue. Why is this community important to you, and what should more sales leaders understand about developing and retaining women in sales?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I'm really passionate about empowering unseen talent. So, as women, we face a lot of hidden barriers that we don't always speak up about or voice. So, that might look like isolation or imposter syndrome or comparison. And the way that we can dismantle those barriers is we can provide community and mentorship and resources. So, through closers, we are that avenue or that outlet for women to share what they're experiencing, and also just to know that they do deserve that seat at the table, and we'll help them fight for that.
Yeah, that's great. This next question, we can stick with you to start, Jenny. Leadership requires juggling business targets with team member goals and motivations. So what strategies help you keep both in harmony, especially in a tough year?
Yeah, I think tough years, there's something that we have to learn to navigate. They're always challenging, but I'll go back to that quote about leadership is not about control, it's about energy calibration. So, how can we as a leader remain a constant for our reps? Is it the strategy we have in place, or the systems, or the one on ones, or the accountability? How can we be that constant to offer our reps clarity in times of uncertainty? So I think that's a really important piece, just to be steady as a leader, because your team is going to feed off of your energy. And I think that's critical, while celebrating the small wins, even though we might not have big wins in tough times, but focusing on, the things that we can control to build the morale back up.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add there, Pam?
I think, continuing to focus on going back to those objectives, strategies, and tactics, like going back to those big objectives, and making sure that we are still, and it's important that the big objectives are not just business related. It should also be personal. You want to buy a new house, you want to take a family vacation, whatever it might be, and making sure that we're continuing to focus on like that is the goal here. And hopefully the success that you have in the job is helping enable you to reach those things. And so I think that's a good way to keep that motivation high, keep accountability strong when you can tie it back to things that they care about and can see that connection. That the job that I'm doing is hopefully it's fulfilling in itself, but it also is helping create the life that you want. And I think that when you bring the conversations back to that, you see a good balance of the motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question here before we turn it over to audience Q&A. So if anyone has questions they want to drop into that box at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A, please do so now. This last question is around holiday season. So 'tis the season for all the holiday things. So how are you holding yourselves and your teams accountable to their goals while also being thoughtful about encouraging intentional time off? And Pam, we can start with you on this one.
Sure. I actually had a conversation with my team just yesterday that we want to be able to log off and enjoy the holidays and not be chasing deals and chasing customers. Similarly, our customers want to have the same experience, right? And so let's set some common goals that we're going to rally around and, and have kind of like a power couple of weeks so that we can say by this date, we are all going to log off, right? And so it's this kind of like shared camaraderie, building kind of some of this culture around we're gonna like full step ahead for the next couple of weeks and then log off. The team knows, kind of what we already talked about. If you need to take afternoons off, you need those breaks between now and then, of course. But it's setting these mini goals as a team that we can share and rally around, so that then we can all celebrate and have time off that we're celebrating together too.
Love that. What about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I echo everything Pam said. I think being very clear in was what is expected, but also recognizing that high performance needs to be coupled with periods of rest and recovery. So I'm a big fan as a leader of modeling that myself. So my reps know that it is okay to take time off. But I also really try and build systems that operate when I'm not there. So that might look like an AI powered coaching tool that you could put a call into and you can get feedback as if it were me. But it's just, an avenue that reps can have when I'm not physically in seat. But I do really believe that as leaders, we have to show our reps that it's okay to take time off, because it's really common in busy seasons just to push through.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of these good anecdotes today. I've learned a lot personally, and I know the audience has too and has some questions here. So, one that came through, where do you seek leadership training to sharpen your tools as a leader yourselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think Udemy comes to mind. This is a shameless plug. But it is an incredible tool that we have access to as an employee of Udemy. And there are so many courses to improve your skills. You could even role play and try out a hard conversation with a rep. So I wasn't planning on a plug for Udemy, but it really is an incredible tool.
I would add, find networking groups that you love. I'm also a very social person, so that's something that energizes me is being able to actually network, be around others, just have like some natural brainstorming. And so I'm part of a few different networking groups that either get together virtually as well as some in person. And so find your groups that you can find other like-minded people to just bounce ideas off of. I also have a strong network of former colleagues, other sales leaders just in my network that we'll text, email, just I've got an idea, I want to run this by you. So that's been motivating for me. I also read a lot of just articles that have a lot that are fed to me, new ideas. But the one thing I will add is in sales, it's very easy we're like in our own world. We're in sales mode and the way that we think and that we operate, especially over years. It's can be different. And I think having people that you are trusted advisors in your network that maybe aren't necessarily in sales, maybe they're a leader in a different capacity or just in a completely different role, being intentional to bounce things off of them as well. You'll be surprised how much, whether they just bring you back down to speed and say, hey, why is this such a big deal? You know what? It's actually not. It's because I'm in my sales mode, right? So I think that's been something I've learned over the years that's surprising to me is having allies that are not anywhere near sales will really help keep you grounded.
Love it. We plugged Udemy. Great solution. You should definitely check it out, and we'll link to it in the recap. But I'll also plug Wise because we do offer mentorship matching. So if you are interested in getting a mentor or becoming a mentor, you can fill out a form, and that can help kind of what Pam is saying as well with growing your network and getting some outside perspectives. Another question came through. What skills have been most important for you in building credibility and developing confidence in your ideas as a leader?
I can take that one. So I think getting visibility within the organization and having influence is something that I've learned is really important as a leader. It comes to mind kind of with what I was mentioning with stretching yourself horizontally, but really ensuring that you have that visibility within an organization is something that we're not taught. We kind of have to acquire as we continue on our leadership journey, but I think it's critical, and just having that influence within an organization.
I agree with Jenny. It just helps, like, part of our role is to be that advocate for our teams and for our customers, and being able to navigate your internal organization is really important. I would add empathy. That's something that isn't necessarily, I think, more so nowadays in leadership, but historically hasn't been kind of front and center. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and his philosophies around leadership, and your teams come first. And sometimes, relying on your team to have really solid strategies and they're front and center, and just being that guide for them and being empathetic and creating avenues and removing roadblocks for them is the biggest role that we can play as a leader. And that isn't necessarily always taught. And so I think that's an important skill to be able to navigate.
Mhm. Last one here. This is a big question that you may have to think on for a minute. Has there been a particular learning moment in your career or challenge that you faced that really shaped who you think the leader you are today?
I actually do have one. Um, I've been fortunate to have many leaders that I very much admire, still rely on today as mentors, but I have also had some really bad leaders. And I'm not to call him, but there was one in particular that has really stood out to me. And the feeling that I would feel based on certain interactions, reflecting on that, on sometimes it was things that were said that were not intentionally rude or mean, or with a negative connotation, but how it made me felt that way. And so it was a really good moment for me, that as a leader of others, to be able to think, hey, sometimes the things that I say, or the timing in which we bring things up, things that we don't say, right? Communication was a big part of why I think this person, was not necessarily a strong leader for me. And so it helped reframe me on being much more intentional around the words that I say matter, the tone that I uses matters, things that maybe I don't say and should have matters, and how people feel and can be so motivating or demotivating in that moment. Just that one thing that you said could really crush someone. And so that was a very defining moment in my career that I recall back on often.
Yeah.
What not to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say sometimes we learn most in those scenarios of, okay, never doing that. How can I
Yeah.
make sure I course correct for future things? That's great to know. Jenny, anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, something that comes to mind. I got laid off back in 2016, and that really threw me. I don't know how many people in this room have been laid off, but it is just kind of a shock to your identity. And I really struggled to navigate that, and if sales was the right career for me. So that's something that I'm so glad that I came back from. I had to take some time off, to just kind of reconsider where I was and where I wanted to go, but I'm so glad that I re-entered back into sales, and found a new company that really energized me. But that was definitely a very low low. That's just standing out. I'm sure there's many more, but that one was particularly tough.
I guess in that scenario, because many on the call and just in general with Wise and conversations we've had over the last couple of years, people have experienced layoffs and are continuing to. Is there anything you did in that time that helped you assess that sales was the right decision for you, and then potentially not if you had decided not to go that route?
Yeah, so actually I did join a networking crew, and or a networking group rather, and I evaluated other roles in similar avenues and go-to-market spaces. But what I've always realized is that I am very aligned to sellers, and through, I am in sales. Even though there was a slight dip in kind of my motivation to stay there, excuse me. I always find my way back to my North Star, and sometimes it takes other people's perspective to just realign you.
Yeah, that's great. One more question here. What strategies or tactics do you use to stretch your reps and their weaknesses?
I can go. I'll bring it back to mindset, activity, skill set. So this is something that I think it's really important to, again, focus on one thing that we can control. But a really important part of that is getting the reps buy-in. So I don't want to ever go to a rep and say, this is where you are weak. I want to have them surface that to me. And then together we can build out a plan to work on that one thing, but also help them understand that by doing this and by having more success in this one area, we're going to get you further in your career and we're going to get you to that next step. So getting their buy-in on maybe what might be perceived as a weakness to them, but also letting them know how solving this perceived weakness will get you to your goals.
Mhm.
I agree with Jenny on the gaining buy-in. That's critical first. And then another tactic I love is that this idea of like mini goals. And so developing a new skill or that could be a big, that's an end goal, but giving these little micro, hey, by end of day tomorrow, let's try this thing, right? And we'll regroup, or by our next one-on-one, go listen to this thing and and share some feedback. So whatever it is that you're working on, giving them little micro things that are moving in that direction, feel very manageable, bite size. Again, those little celebrate little wins. It also helps you stay on path and course correct early if it's starting to go awry.
Mhm. And then, second to that question, what is the best and hardest part of being a leader from your perspectives?
For me, I think it's probably one and the same. The best is being able to see other people reach goals, see them learn new things or try, accomplish things that they never thought possible, seeing the outcomes in their personal life, that you're able to help them navigate. So those are huge highs, and then the lows are kind of those same things when those things don't happen, right? And you want them so bad for them, but maybe they aren't having the best year they wanted, or maybe they are having a few, challenging, obstacles back to back, and helping just be that shoulder for them. Sometimes, again, that's a positive, but it also it can weigh on you because I do care deeply personally, and think about it when I'm not at work. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. Sometimes we bring home the issues that our reps are going through. And I think along with Pam's sentiment on being an empathetic leader, it can energize you sometimes, but it can also deplete you when you feel for your reps, you feel for that tough month that they went through. So that's definitely one of the things that stands out to me. I think also being a manager of a team that may be perceived as a stepping stone to their next career in sales, I have them for a very short amount of time. So it's so fun to see the impact that I can make in that maybe year and a half. But then the reality is they leave you. And that's always a little bit tough, but you're so excited for their next journey and where they're going in their career.
Yeah, absolutely. We can leave on this one quick fire question I have based on what you just shared, because y'all are empathetic leaders. It can be depleting at times. How do you recharge?
Yeah. It's a good question. We actually just did a session on this with Sarah Healy, our Chief Learning Officer, and the whole session was on a pit stop. So we realized that we can't take too long of breaks because there are high expectations. We have to keep moving quickly. But some of the ways that we can recharge is we can go for a walk. or we can unplug for a minute, or we can snooze our Slack notifications. We can feel confident that we take breaks and then show our team that it's okay to take breaks as well. So, however that looks, maybe it's a quick workout, maybe it's a glass of wine at the end of the day.
Mhm.
It is important to recharge so you can show up the next day as your full self.
Mhm.
I do a lot of similar little mini walks. I'll just take even if it's just a 5 minute get away. There's a lot of research that like being outside and movement really, it creates more creativity and open space and clarity. And so I really, and I do that whether I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling depleted, or when I'm just feeling like a lack of creativity, like I don't have ideas to share right now and I need them. I try to just go for a walk or get some sort of movement going, and that tends to help me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. This was such a helpful session. Again, very timely for the point we are in the year. I hope everyone has a great last quarter. I will send a recap email with some of the highlights from the conversation, as well as today's recording and our fabulous panelists' LinkedIn's by tomorrow. And in that as well, there will be a form that you can fill out if you're interested in learning more about Udemy, because they do have big hiring goals to finish out the year, but also kicking off 2026. So there's going to be a lot of growth on their team. And if you're interested in learning more about that, we want to make sure that you're connected with the right person to learn more on their team. So keep an eye out for that by tomorrow. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the year. Thanks for joining us. And thank you again, Pam and Jenny.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.